Welcome back. Today we're going to do another Epic 7 hero review. Today we're going to talk about Landy, the new limited. As of this video, she hasn't even been out a week, so some of my opinions are not fully set in stone, but I'm going to discuss how I feel about her so far after playtesting her pretty thoroughly over the weekend during the free Unequip event. So as always, we'll go over skills, builds, a little showcase, and then I'm going to go over her strengths and weaknesses and summarize her. So let's get started. Alright, so skills. Her S1 is pretty basic. She just does an attack, and it's kind of like DN's in the sense that she gets 15% combat readiness if the enemy doesn't have any buffs, but 30% combat readiness if they are buffed at max mola. So it's very similar to DN's, except DN's is she has to be buffed, I think. But basically her S1 means that she turn cycles very fast, and it actually hits quite hard. Her S2 is kind of like Spectre Tenebria's, except no one has to die. She just gets it after every single attack. So after 5 turns at max mola, she has 50% extra attack, or essentially a full attack buff. Also, the important thing is she gets 10 fighting spirit for every buff granted to an enemy, and if she gets full fighting spirit, it resets her S3 cooldown. So basically, if the enemy has 10 or more buffs, every single turn she can S3, and that makes her kind of bonkers against certain teams. Now her S3 is her main damage move. It gives her increased speed for 2 turns. Are you getting the theme here? She's just meant to turn cycle really fast. When it's full, she does extra damage, or when her fighting spirit is full, she does extra damage. And it also increases your entire team CR by 15%, and it looks pretty cool. This is the basic one, but if you have max fighting spirit, then a little Gundam robot thing will come out and do bonus damage. So we'll go ahead and see that here. So basically her kit revolves around doing a lot of damage and turn cycling her very, very quickly. Now let's go over how to build her. Alright, so let's go over how to build Landy. This is not ideal because a free Unequip ended and I switched some of her gear around, but let's go over my targets. So it is my strong opinion that Landy is a bruiser. Some people are trying to use her as a cleaver. I do not agree with her at all. The way her S2 works, it doesn't make any sense to me to try and use her as a cleaver, because there are other cleavers like Ludwig, etc. that just have much more powerful opening attacks. You really need her to ramp up over time. So to me, she's a bruiser. So I think around 3,000 attack is enough. Obviously more is better. My target would be 1250 or higher defense, 15,000 or more HP, 180 or more speed. Now, I actually don't prioritize speed very much on Landy at all, because the way her kit works, she turn cycles extremely fast, and remember, from the very first turn she gets increased speed, so she is much faster than she looks, even if you don't stack speed on her. And then crit chance and crit damage, as usual with attack, you just want them as high as possible. So with my build here currently, I have kind of throwaway gear on her now, but ideally I'd want to get her about 200 more defense and at least 1,000 more HP, because the thing with Landy is if you bring her to RTA, the other people are generally going to focus her first. I recommend speed set on her. I mean, if you want to experiment with her on counter set or something, you could try it, because when she counters, she will get big CR pushes. I don't think that's reliable or worth it, though. In terms of artifacts, I really do think that her own artifact is the best one. Now, the problem with her artifact is that against teams with no buffs, it doesn't do anything. But in general, I find that a team without buffs, Landy is not good in general, so you wouldn't bring her anyway. We'll discuss that more later. The other obvious strong option is Reingar's Special Drink. My SSB has it, but I only have 1 copy, and I honestly do think this artifact is better than Reingar's on Landy overall, especially if you're using her as a bruiser and not some kind of cheese cleave build. So that's how I think you should build Landy. Let's go to the showcase. Alright, so let's try Landy against this team. The one problem with this team is it has ML Ken, but we're just going to have faith in Mr. Krau's ability to deal with this evil ML Ken here. There we go. We'll get our attack buff up. And, let's just Gundam them right off the bat. Pretty solid damage. And didn't crit the ML Ken apparently. Landy's a genius. Alright, now we'll push back this SSB. And look at all these buffs they have. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna heal up Landy here. She's probably gonna die and we're gonna need to revive her. And, you know what? I don't even think we need to put up the barrier. And now we soul burn and we Gundam them in the face. Notice how she S3 back to back. If the other team has a lot of buffs, she just goes over and over and their whole team is dead. Landy, you savage. Like, did you guys see that? She S3'd, and because of her S2 passive on her very next turn, her S3 was refreshed again. And now, we don't care. We just want to deal with this ML Ken. We're going to let Landy do the rest of the work. So, ML Ken's gone. We don't have to care about him countering anymore. Now, they don't have any buffs anymore, so she's not going to be able to refresh her S3. But at this point, the match is already pretty much over, so it doesn't really matter all that much. We'll just put up the barrier just in case. And now it's just a cleanup, so we'll just work on this maid Chloe. If we get lucky, Landy will be able to land another wicked S3, but look at that, her S1 is not Mola, and even her S1 does pretty good damage. Oh, here we go. There's a buff on Acid, but we'll just shoot SSB. Now SSB's dead. That sound is so satisfying. She's just sniping people. But I think that's really what I wanted to show. The main strength of hers is the fact that she could cycle her S3 so damn quickly because of her S2 passive. Just back-to-back S3s there. Devastating. Alright, so now let's just screw around. I don't recommend you use her this way, but let's see her damage. So I picked a team with no knights on it to attack. ML Ken's just there to deal with the Arbiter after the revive. And let's see how much damage Landy can pull off. So, whoa. What is that, Serena? Very baffling. Alright, so I'll just open on the Riolet. And now we can push up Landy. She won't have the bonus from the max fighting spirit, but we can soul burn. So let's see how much damage this pulls off. Pretty solid, a one-shot wipe. So this Arbiter's gonna die here, but as you can see, Landy can do some serious damage. I mean, I still don't recommend you use her as a cleaver. She's not going to hit anywhere near as hard as like a Ludwig, but her multipliers are pretty solid. Now RTA. I think this is really the main content that Landy is designed for. It's a common theme with newly released heroes that they're really built for RTA. There's enough heroes to handle regular arena and guild wars to begin with. So I kind of recorded a few matches just to kind of show how she's used. And this is the main thing, like, you're going to notice that I brought her against a lot of DN teams and like FCC teams. You really rely on the other team having a lot of buffs for Landy to be usable in this kind of content. Now, the problem is, that's not all teams. Like, if they don't have a lot of buffs, she doesn't get her greater attack, she doesn't reset her S3, so it's very limited where you can bring her. So, she's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors hero in that if they do have a lot of buffs, she is a relentless damage threat. The other problem with her, though, is that you need to build her kind of as a bruiser because their main priority is going to be to kill her first. So I honestly think her best pairing is with like Ruel and a knight. You really need to be able to protect her, which is easier said than done because, like I said, she's always cycling out of her defensive buffs. But if you do manage to protect her and they're a team that relies on a lot of buffs, she will relentlessly chew that team apart because she can S3 nonstop. She turn cycles insanely because all her moves have increased CR, and she has a self speed buff. So even if you only build her like 170, 180 speed, she behaves like a 250 speed hero. She just gets so many turns. So by far RTA is her best content, but even in that, she's not really a hero you can draft in every single situation. A terrible early pick. You're really going to want to pick her number 4 or number 5 after you've seen what the enemy has picked already. So that's her PvP showcase. Let's move on to the summary. Alright, so as always, we summarize by asking, is Landy good? And my honest answer is sort of. She's not really that great in my opinion, and that's coming from me, who is actually a very big fan of this hero because she's a lot of fun. So I'm going to do something new in this video and go over strengths and weaknesses. So her strengths are that her damage output is actually really insane against certain teams. Now, I tried using her against things like DN teams or Last Rider crowd teams, and when you do that, she literally S3s every turn, and if she can survive enough to have her S2 ramp up, like people are pissed off because she doesn't do enough damage on her opening S3, that's not the point. Once she starts doing it like 4 or 5 times, it does crazy damage because she has a built-in attack buff that also stacks with greater attack buff. So she can do crazy damage output against certain teams, and honestly, if you get her to a certain point, her damage is essentially unhealable, and if Battle Frenzy ramps up, she'll one-shot entire teams by herself. Now, weaknesses, and she does have quite a few. Her S2 is really based on the other team having a lot of buffs. So this makes it really hard to draft because if you're bringing her against a team that doesn't have many buffs to begin with, she's very awkward to use because she just ends up spamming her S1 over and over because she can't reset her S3. Now, on the plus side, her S1's multipliers are actually pretty damn solid, so that does do pretty good damage, so it's not too bad. The other weakness with her is that her speed, I find, actually works against her. Because like I said, I think you need to build her as a bruiser, but because she turn cycles so fast, when I use her, I run into this awkward problem where she turn cycles out of all of her defensive buffs so fast that it makes it really easy for the other team to target her. It is impossible to keep like crit reduction or defense buff up on Landy because she gets like 4 turns before anyone else on your team gets a single turn. So it makes her very awkward to protect against. Another weakness is building her is hard because she's a bruiser, but she also needs damage. I find similar issues to gearing her as I did with LQC because if they're too squishy, they just get blown up. If you make them hit really hard, they just get focused and die immediately. So to me, those are her main weaknesses. The main weakness for her is that she's just really hard. Like, it's really hard to find a situation where Landy would be a great option, but in that small subset of situations, she is actually quite strong. So let's go over her ratings. So arena offense, I'm going to give her like a B-. She's not really so bad in arena offense, but the problem with me using Landy is I don't think she's a viable cleaver, so you don't want to use her for that. So basically, I found myself using her as kind of like an SSB because she does do a lot of damage over time. The problem with that to me is I basically used her as a replacement for SSB and SSB auto comps, and I found that SSB just does much better. So it's not so much her fault, but to me, SSB was better than her in all the comps that Landy worked in, so I didn't really feel any reason to use her. Arena defense, I can't see any reason why anyone would use her. She's squishy and she's never going to get off all her S3s. I'm just going to go ahead and give her an F right there. I don't think she'll be a staple on arena defense. Guild Wars offense, I'm going to give her a C. I did try to use her. It was kind of the same problem. It was more like, why would I want to use Landy versus something that's safer, like an SSB or just like a bruiser comp? Like, she doesn't... It's difficult because a lot of defenses aren't going to be buff heavy defenses because they don't want to just get countered by something like Basar or ML Roman. So defenses, strong ones, are generally relying around RNG and blowing up your team first. I mean, you're never going to see a DN on defense for the most part. So Guild Wars offense, I don't think she's good. Guild Wars defense, same thing with arena defense. I just think she's terrible. Like, it makes no sense to bring her. She's a squishy that needs turns to ramp up. Maybe you could try with Maid Chloe, but again, I think this is not going to be a common hero in Guild Wars defense. I'll have to give her an F there. For RTA, I'm going to give her best rating there. I think she's like a B+ in RTA. So the thing with Landy is she's kind of like Blood Moon Haste-ish in a way, like not in terms of their kit, but in terms of the fact that you really only want to bring them in certain situations. But the thing is, Blood Moon Haste against Revires is dominant. Landy is not dominant against buff teams. She's very, very strong. But the thing is, against buff teams, buffs make the enemy so much stronger. So generally what you want to do is get them to get rid of their buffs. Landy is kind of counterintuitive in the sense that you want them to keep their buffs because you want to keep resetting her S3. But then that means the entire enemy team will have things like attack buff, defense buff, etc. The other big problem with Landy was when I was trying to record footage of her in RTA, I was finding myself struggling to pick her because in a lot of the drafts, it just made no sense to bring her. Like if they went Cleave, she's useless. If they went like super offensive Bruiser, too risky, she's useless because she's going to get blown up. Like if they had no buffs on their team to begin with, like if they were maining Ruel instead of DN, I felt like she wasn't going to do much. So again, hard to bring. So very hard to bring. Typically, I used her a lot against DN teams and like Last Rider Crow teams. Against those teams, I found that she could sometimes single-handedly put enough damage output to get me the W. But again, the number of matches where I felt that Landy was an appropriate pick was so small that it was hard for me to justify a better rating than B+ when you have heroes like Alencia and SSB and Crow, where essentially you can bring them to any match and they're going to have an immediate impact. I don't think Landy's that kind of hero. I think you have to be very careful about what matches you bring her to. So anyways, that's my review of Landy. Remember, these are very early impressions because she hasn't even been out a week, but these are my personal opinions as a fairly high-level player, having tested her for hours over the weekend. So if you have your own opinions, feel free to share them in the comment section below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Thanks for watching. Until next time, peace out.